Nick Condon, South Australian Government Online Accessibility Policy and Toolkit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here, and thank you for the invitation to come and speak. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, the traditional owners of this land. In Adelaide, we say Nina Mani, that's g'day and welcome, and we'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their leaders past, present and emerging. Now, I hope you don't mind this afternoon. I'm not going to talk to 20% of you, and I think it will be this 20% just here, okay? No acknowledgement, no conversation. If you can just block your ears, that would be perfect. Of course, I'm not going to do that, but when 1 in 5 people have a disability in Australia, that's kind of what we do every single day of the week when we don't create inclusive digital solutions. If I was walking into a retail environment and was not looking after 1 in 5 people, you'd know about it pretty quickly. If I was making a phone conversation or at a call centre and not answering that 1 in 5 calls, albeit when I'm on hold for an hour, sometimes I feel like I'm not being answered, you'd know that pretty quickly. But somehow when we move to the online space, we tend to forget that there's people who may not be able to get through a particular solution or a particular transaction. And I guess when so many things are moving online, we really need to bring online accessibility and online inclusion to the forefront. So like I said, there's a little bit going on online. I love that video because it makes you think if that's what's happening in 60 seconds, imagine what's happening in an hour, imagine what's happening in a day. And if 20% of those people wanting to complete those transactions aren't able to complete them, we've got a serious problem. So in South Australia, I head up a thing called the Office for Digital Government. We focus on working with agencies and being a technical centre of excellence for a South Australian government. We get that not every agency and not every department has the digital skills and expertise that are required, but equally so, there's some things that are better done at a whole of government level, and online accessibility is definitely one of those. So you may have heard, we launched in May for Global Accessibility Day our online policy and accessibility toolkit. And I want to talk today a little bit around how that came about. I want to talk how we got through that process, where we're at the moment, and what's happening next. So in 2018, a new government was elected in South Australia, and the very first piece of legislation that they enacted was actually the Disability Inclusion Act. For us, we wanted to take a proactive approach from that act and see what we could do to make sure that what was happening in the digital space was meeting that new legislation. We also realised that when it comes to people who are building those digital things, there's a real gap. We know that from a South Australian government perspective, our existing policy had a lot of opportunity to meet new capabilities, new expectations. That the accessibility challenges that governments were having weren't just around the way that we write, but actually there was a lot of WCAG compliancy issues as well. Usability and challenges existed with many other government websites, and we know that as a primary source of information where people were going, we absolutely needed to make sure we increased that. And finally, just the way of the world. Many government services are moving digital. And so for us to take the opportunity to bake accessibility in at design level, not as an afterthought, was an opportunity that was too good to be true. We did a range of pieces of research because we really wanted to understand who are these people that we would be building an accessibility policy and toolkit and inclusive things in the digital space for. And what it told us was this: the people who don't have digital or who have challenges with digital are generally 60% older South Australians, 49% of those with a disability, 42% low-income South Australians, and 60% South Australians without qualifications. And what that said to us was this: the digital divide was growing. Those who can use technology, those who are digital natives, they are flying ahead, moving at pace, wanting more services, wanting more digital things. Unfortunately though, for those who maybe weren't able to access or had lower digital inclusive rates, the gap was getting further and further and further. So we built our online accessibility policy, effectively the piece of paper that government agencies look at and reference when it comes to building digital things that they would need to build to. We absolutely made sure that it met international standards, Australian standards like the Digital Service Standard, as well as Commonwealth standards. But more than that, we really wanted to call out what it applies to. So public websites and intranets, PDFs, online forms, survey tools, apps, and other non-web-based software as well. Really, and we use the technical term if we can, just digital things. If it's digital, if it's on the internet, if it's on a mobile or computer device, we should probably make sure that it's included in this policy. The policy from our side is around helping agencies understand their obligations when it comes to creating public services or public platforms in the online space. But more than that, we really were hoping that we'd actually lift the conversation and the awareness and the importance of online accessibility and digital inclusion. So we're really proud that we're now taking a role within government and broader than South Australia to make sure that this important work that we've started and that is being done in lots and lots of other jurisdictions is actually elevated to a point that those decision makers and those who are controlling the strategies for digital for government are making sure that inclusion is absolutely and accessibility at the front of their mind. For a few minutes just to talk through how we got our policy created, because there are lots and lots of people with lots of different lived experiences when it comes to disability and lots of requirements and needs when it comes to inclusion and online accessibility. So we did a range of in-person testing, getting people with lived experience to use our current websites and our current digital tools, and just talking with them to find out where their challenges were, to understand what kind of assistive tools are they using, and how can we make sure that we're preparing our digital things in the best way possible so that those assistive tools or the way that they interact with our digital platforms is best suited. We did a range of qualitative and quantitative research too, so surveys and understanding the non-for-profit sector, the disability sector. But interestingly, we also spoke to the public sector and the private sector to understand that it's not just government websites, but actually there's a range of private enterprise services that people with a disability use just like anybody else. And government's role really needs to be around educating those websites, small to medium enterprises, that when they're building their digital websites or digital platforms, that they too should be thinking around online accessibility. The other thing we did was look at global and best practices around the world. There's been some great work done by many governments, Canada, the UK, and some excellent work in America. And from our take, why reinvent the wheel? I think that with everybody having limited resources to put into online accessibility, not reinventing the wheel and actually seeing where we can add value or continue to grow the online inclusion conversation was really important for us. South Australian Government takes a human-centred design approach to everything that we do, and this policy was no different. So working in government workshops with various stakeholders who are building digital platforms or building things with those in mind of citizens. Also taking an agile approach, so not just speaking once, but actually many conversations over 18 months, making sure that the information that we heard in a workshop would be built, prototyped, and then actually provided back to those people to make sure that we were actually getting it right. On top of that, we also took a really innovative approach to our policy design. Quite often policy is done within government. It's created for government, it's within government, and we kind of just do it within our own shop. But instead what we did was actually take that government policy out broader. So we have a platform in South Australia called Your Say. It's effectively a citizen engagement platform. We have 120,000 citizens, or about 10% of the voting public, who actually are on board with that system. We kind of think it's like, if you think around Greenpeace for a second, Greenpeace had an advertising campaign a while ago that said, you don't need to tie yourself to a tree to support Greenpeace. And equally so, from a government side, you don't need to run for Parliament or be a sitting member to actually be shaping the way the government works. And so that website really works as a consultative mechanism for us to ask citizens and those that have an interest in the things that government is doing to provide their feedback. We got over 400 pieces of unique feedback from that consultation that were then taken and incorporated into the policy. Again, we worked alongside Vision Australia. We also worked alongside the Royal Society for the Blind and many people with that lived experience to make sure that as we were creating these elements that they were being fit for purpose and not creating a government document that alienated or didn't include the right people or consider some critical things that those who are dealing with disabilities or online accessibility on a day-to-day basis were considering. And so we created this policy, and that was great. We thought in the first instance maybe that's job done. But what actually became really clear is that there's a huge education piece when it comes to online accessibility and digital inclusion, and that extends far broader than just government. So we decided to do this.
We live in a world where everything is turning digital, from the way you order food, book a car, organise your holiday, or use government services. At the same time, our communities are becoming more and more diverse. We all live in different places and have different backgrounds. We're old, young, live with disability, speak multiple languages, and access online services in different ways, on different devices, from different locations, right around South Australia. The South Australian Government believes digital things like websites and apps should be created with the whole community in mind. That's why we created the Online Accessibility Toolkit. The toolkit is free and publicly available so that everyone can create accessible digital platforms that are easy to navigate and read, work on different devices, and consider good design and colour, ensuring that captions, transcripts and code are built in a way that the 1 in 5 Australians who have a disability can access without disadvantage. Co-designed with over 100 different organisations, including Vision Australia, Royal Society for the Blind SA, and people with a lived experience of disability, the toolkit provides best practice guidelines, easy-to-use checklists and communities to ensure all government, non-for-profit and private enterprise design with accessibility in mind. Everyone has a role to play in creating accessible online solutions, and anyone can contribute by embedding inclusive design into their work. View the Online Accessibility Toolkit at accessibility.sa.gov.au.
We realised that just creating a policy or a piece of paper for government wasn't enough. We needed to provide guidelines, checklists, and more than that, an education piece for the various roles when you create digital things on their responsibilities to create more inclusive digital platforms. If you go to accessibility.sa.gov.au, you'll see lots and lots of information. But one of the things that we think is really important is creating checklists and information for each of the roles for when people build or create digital things. What should a project manager be thinking? What should a developer be thinking? What should visual designers or policy people be thinking? And actually making sure that each of those areas, each of those roles, have specific lists to help them make sure that they are putting in accessibility from design, not as an afterthought. The other thing we did was create a range of government tools that agencies could use and leverage that actually had accessibility in by default. One of those is our website design system. If you think around Wix or Squarespace, those templated websites that you can build in minutes, why shouldn't we have one of those for government that's got accessibility and other components like cybersecurity built in by default? Agencies can come with their content, create a design, know that it's actually WCAG 2.0 AA certified by default, implement their content and be accessible straight out of the box. We also looked at our digital forms input. So we know that a lot of people, when they're transacting with government, are providing information and ensuring that the forms or the mechanisms that they're putting information in are accessible too. We also created a range of services for government agencies and the broader sector to take advantage of, including our accessibility testing and auditing service. So within government now, if an agency is not sure around their digital thing or want to understand how close or for that matter how far away they are from meeting that WCAG 2.0 AA certification, we'll actually work alongside them doing the standard kind of audits that you'd expect, but more than that, bringing in users and those with lived experience to be able to go through those platforms and give real feedback. Those user testing services continue for new platforms as well. Build it, test it, fix it, launch it. That's what we're saying to government agencies. When you're building new inclusive digital tools, build it and test it before you launch. Work out what might need to be tweaked or take a different perspective and then actually launch after that. And we've seen some huge success with that. The other thing I think that's really clear, and it's great to see so many people at a summit like this, is there's a huge education piece that still needs to be done. A lot of people's best intent just doesn't have accessibility in mind. And it's not because they don't want to, it's just because they haven't thought about it before. And the moment you tell them and explain why it's important, they're on board. So for us, making sure that we take the role of educating, not just within government, but broader around the importance of accessibility, is a really important leadership position that we believe South Australia needs to take. That includes everything from online accessibility training and resources, and they're available on the Accessibility Toolkit, free and publicly available. Regular information and training sessions, and also industry briefings. Government in South Australia is one of the largest customers when it comes to ICT and technology, and so we've actually got a real opportunity to be reminding those vendors, some small and some larger, that when they're providing responses or tenders or procurement back for government, that they should be including accessibility absolutely by default. And if they need assistance, then we're actually here as a government service to provide that as well. I think the final part of this is that there's actually, like I was saying, a lot of people who are really excited around accessibility. In South Australia, there wasn't any mechanism for those people to meet up, to share, to talk. And so we're now 2 sessions in, but we've created our own digital accessibility and inclusion meetup, happening about every 6 weeks. One mechanism to bring people together, but the second part is to actually bring experts in field into South Australia and have a chance for them to talk through with that community around the various efforts and specific things that they're looking after. We're working through our Easyread concept at the moment. So accessibility by default is great, but government is full of jargon, 3-letter acronyms, lots and lots of them. How do we actually take the grade level reading that we provide and make sure that the information is consumable and interpretable by all people? So we're spending a lot of time at the moment now looking at content, not just structure, to make sure that our Easyread benefits are there and that we're actually spending time with agencies to build that into their process. We're feeling really proud as well because we've done some really great work and our collaboration and recognition from this toolkit is actually being seen far and wide. And for little old South Australia, yay us. We're currently working alongside Vision Australia on a case study on good government using accessibility. We're working with British Columbia, New South Wales, Gov UK, Canada, and a range of other organisations now taking a leadership position in accessibility for government, which is great. We've also been creating a lot of hype from an awards perspective for the work that we've done. And for a team that were very small in the creation of this, to be able to validate the importance of that work through recognition through things like the iAwards, the Australian Access Awards, and in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be back here actually in this building as a finalist for the Human Rights Awards. We're up for an award around excellence in government. So for us, I think it really touches home that technology might be about ones and zeros and binaries sometimes, but what it's really about at the heart is people and citizens. And we can't take our mind off that, and that's why we've been really proud to create the accessibility policy and the toolkit as well. Happy to take some questions now if you have any. Otherwise, I'll hang around a little bit later this afternoon and love to talk and hear any feedback if you've had a look and things that we might be able to do better. We believe we're in constant beta, so we're always looking for ways to improve and increase. But equally so, if you'd like to find out more information or see how you can take some of the things we've created and use in your own environments, we'd be happy to share anything we've created as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nick. We'll take one question. I think we might be able to squeeze in one question, but then you might be able to catch Nick at afternoon tea.
Hi, Nick. I'm Erin Beale from Melbourne Water.
Hi.
So I'm really impressed with, obviously, what you guys have done. And being semi-government, we kind of seem to fall into this weird hole of not technically having to be compliant with government guidelines. Is there any fuel or ammunition I can bring back to my organisation to really drive home the point that, you know, a technicality really isn't good enough as an excuse to not do better?
Yeah, it's funny. I used to, before this, I used to work in media, and it was photos of Kim Kardashian all day, every day, right? But part of that was that you could deal with demographics. We were just after a certain kind of person, and that's all we had to deal with, right? When it comes to creating government or utility-based platforms, we're actually building it for everyone by default. Like, who is your customer? Your customer is everyone. And yes, you can say, well, our customer might look like this or have a particular feel, but at the end of the day, we're providing services for all, you know, our citizens. And for me, we did a lot of work around the framing of who is who's using these services, and also going back to business to understand who the customer was. And I think where possible, taking the conversation away from being digital and being based around business and customer really helped bring some relevance. The other part was making sure that we made things easy for people to consume, because I think a lot of this stuff sometimes does just go over people's head, or they think it's too hard. So the one thing we created for that toolkit was those specific checklists for specific roles. It allows ambassadors of accessibility to go and have meaningful conversations around specific role types. So you can go to a project manager and go, hey, you've only got to do these 2 or 3 things, and you're actually ticking your box. And so sometimes you kind of do it, I wouldn't say by osmosis, but it's more by infiltration and kind of flanking from the sides. Because the individuals generally are where the decisions are being made, not necessarily at the higher level. And if you can work alongside those individuals, sometimes you can get a lot of this stuff happening without necessarily having to go to those higher governance levels in the first instance.
Yeah, thank you. Interestingly enough, we've actually got leadership buying in. It's just actually getting staff to really work out that it is actually their job it is your job to be accessible.
Bring in some people with lived experience.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that we did that was really meaningful. We have our town halls,
yeah.
And we'd bring in people and actually get them to sit and talk through their experiences, their frustrations, and their life. Because, I mean, you know, we talk around people with disabilities not being something that holds them back in everything that they do in their life. But actually, when you're controlling the platforms they need to access, we could be holding them back. And so it really puts that emphasis and responsibility back on the creators to really think around things. But yeah, one thing that we found from an individual level that really helped was having those people with lived experience come in, tell their stories, and kind of really pull the heartstrings of some of the people that just don't know.
Yeah, thank you.